Daf Yomi, Tractate Zevachim, page 113b. And we are up to, let's see here, the first line is on the top, maybe one line in the words Ika D'Amri. Ika D'Amri, Sveresh Lavish Rabbechanan, Aye Mesim Abul, Aye Mesim Nebuchadnezzar, my love, Midehani Havo Hadne Hanami Havo Mide Iria Hodika Ise. There are those who say that the discussion should be inverted, and Reish Lakish raised an objection to Rabbi Yochanan, who holds that the flood did not affect Eretz Yisrael. From that Braita, as Rabbi Yehoshua said, where are the dead of the flood, and where are all the dead killed by Nebuchadnezzar? Reish Lakish said, what, is it not possible to infer from this question that since those slaughtered by Nebuchadnezzar were in Eretz Yisrael, those who perished in the flood were also there? Rabbi Yochanan responds, are these cases comparable? This is as it is, and that is as it is, meaning the dead of Nebuchadnezzar were indeed in Eretz Yisrael, but the dead of the flood were not, as there was no flood there, according to him. Reish Lakish raised an objection to Rabbi Yochanan. With regard to the flood, it is stated, all in whose nostrils was the breath of spirit of life, was the breath of the spirit of life, whosoever was on the dry land died. Genesis 7:22. Granted, according to my opinion, that I say, the flood descended upon Eretz Yisrael. Due to that reason, all living creatures on earth died, even those in Eretz Yisrael. But according to your opinion, that the flood did not descend on Eretz Yisrael, why did they die there? Rabbi Yochanan responds, they died due to the heat that accompanied the flood waters, and that spread to Eretz Yisrael as well. Those corpses were then buried in known locations. There are those The Gemara notes that this is in accordance with the statement of Rav Chisda. As Rav Chisda said, the generation of the flood sinned with boiling heat, meaning forbidden sexual intercourse, and they were punished with the boiling heat of the flood waters. As it is written here with regard to the flood, and God remembered Noah and every living creature and all the cattle that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters calmed. In Hebrew, that's Vayishoku Hamayim, Genesis 8:1. And it is written there with regard to the execution of Haman. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's boiling anger was assuaged. Shechacha. Esther 7:10. Okay. This latter verse indicates that a matter is assuaged from heat. Similarly, the waters were hot. Okay. Next. Ika D'Amri, Yishlom Lididi, the Miralo Yar Babula Israel, Bishum Hachi, Ave Haraba, El Lidach, my Haraba Shaita Bikara. There are those who say that this is the discussion. This discussion should be inverted. And in fact, Rabbi Yochanan raised an objection to Reish Lakish from that verse. It is stated that whatsoever was on dry land died. Genesis 7:22. Granted, according to my opinion, that I say, that the flood did not descend upon Eretz Yisrael. Due to that reason, there was an area of dry land even during the flood, and all living creatures there died from the heat. But according to your opinion, that the flood did descend upon Eretz Yisrael, what is the meaning of dry land? There was no dry land anywhere. Reish Lakish responds, the verse is referring to land that had been dry initially before the flood. And why does the Torah call it dry land during the flood? There was no dry land during the flood. It is in accordance with the opinion of Rav Chizda, as Rav Chizda says, during the generation of the flood, no decree was decreed upon the fish in the sea. As it is stated, whatsoever was on the dry land died. Genesis 7:22, meaning only those structures that had been on dry land, but not the fish in the sea. The Gemara asks, granted, according to the one who says the flood did not descend upon Eretz Yisrael, meaning Rabbi Yochanan, this is the explanation of the fact that the Rema remained there. What's a Rema? I'm not sure. The Rema remained in Eretz Yisrael and survived the flood. But according to the one who says the flood descended upon Eretz Yisrael, meaning Reish Lakish, how did the Rema remain? Rema, I guess, is some kind of large animal. Given its large size, it clearly could not fit into Noah's Ark. Rabbi Yanai says they brought Rema cubs into the Ark, and they survived the flood. Okay. Ve'amar Rabba bar bar Chana li'idi chazeli urzila derema bat yome or bar yome v'have kehar tavor kama havya arba'in parse mishachad itzavare tilata parse marbata adresha parsa palga rama keba ushachar yardina. The Gemara asks, but doesn't Rabba bar bar Chana say, I have seen a day-old offspring of the Rema, and it was as large as Mount Tabor. And how large is Mount Tabor? It is 40 parasangs. And the length of the cub's neck was 3 parasangs, and the place where its head rests, meaning its neck, was a parasang and a half. It cast feces and thereby dammed up the Jordan River. Even the cub would have been too large for the ark. Okay. Amar Yochanan the Rosh Yisrael Amar Marbat Andresh the Pasal Palga El Rosh Kotemo Yichnisu Lateva. Rabbi Yochanan says they brought only the head of the cub into the ark, while its body remained outside. The Gemara asks, but doesn't the master, meaning Rabba bar bar Chana, say that the size of the place where its head rests was a parasang and a half? Consequently, even its head alone would not fit into the ark. Rather, they brought the head, the edge of its nose, into the ark so that it might breathe. The rest of it was hanging out in the water. Alright, this news to me. The Gemara wonders why Rabbi Yochanan was compelled to give this answer. But doesn't Rabbi Yochanan say that the flood did not descend upon Eretz Yisrael. According to his opinion, perhaps the Rema survived by remaining there during the flood. The Gemara answers that Rabbi Yochanan said his answer in accordance with the statement of Rish Lakish. Okay. Beha kasagya teva. Rish Lakish kanav kashu b'teva. V'yamar Rav Chizda anshe da ma'abul berotchin kilkru uberotchin nidoinu. Okay. The Gemara challenges, but the ark was moving upon the water. How was it possible to keep the nose of the Rema in the ark? Rish Lakish says they tied its horns to the ark so that the Rema would move with it. The Gemara asks, but doesn't Rav Chizda say that the people of the generation of the flood sinned with boiling heat and were punished with boiling heat? How could the Rema have survived the boiling water? Uletamech teiva echisagya ve'od og melabash nechagai אלא נס עליהן שנצטעדנו בצידי התיבה. The Gemara replies, and according to your reasoning, that it was impossible to survive the boiling water. How did the ark itself move? It was covered with pitch, which melts it with boiling water. Moreover, how did Og, the king of Bashan, see Numbers 21, 33, and 35, who, according to tradition, was of the generation of the flood, stand? How did he survive the boiling water? Rather, it must be that a miracle was performed for them, namely that the water on the sides of the ark cooled, allowing the ark, the Rema, and Og to survive. Very interesting. Ula Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish nihina min yared ba'ol Eretz Yisrael ha'lo pash ve'apash temar Rish Lakish lema nikra shema mitzula shekol mesim ma'avol nitztalelu sham ורבי יוחנן אמר למה נקרא שמה שנער שכל ביתי מבול נגערו שם אי אפשר דלא ידבקו. The Gemara challenges, but even according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, that the flood descended upon Israel, the corpses of those who perished in the flood might impart impurity there to the flood, though the flood did indeed descend upon Eretz Yisrael. No trace of the dead remains there. As Rish Lakish says, why is Babylonia called Mitzulah? See Isaiah 44:27. It is because all the dead of the flood throughout the world sank. Itztalu, over there. And Rabbi Yochanan says, why is Babylonia called Shinar? It is because all the dead of the flood were deposited there. Evidently, even Rish Lakish says that all who died in the flood, including those from Eretz Yisrael, sank in Babylonia. The Gemara responds, it is impossible that the corpses of some of those in Eretz Yisrael who perished in the flood were not stuck in the mud and remained there. At least some should have been stuck there, right? So I'm going to be No, I guess that's it. That's why they hold that. It's impossible that some of the corpses wouldn't have stayed there. Okay. Amar Rabbi Bahu, lama nikra shema shinar, shema da'eres ashireha. Having mentioned some explanations for the names of Babylonia, the Gemara adds, Rabbi Bahu says, why is it called Shinar? Because it shakes. Shema da'eret. It's wealthy people, meaning they do not remain wealthy. The Gemara asks, but we see that there are wealthy people in Babylonia who remain wealthy. The Gemara responds, their wealth does not extend for 3 generations. Okay. Amar Yami, kol ha'ochel mi'afara shel Babel ki'ilu ochel b'sar avutav. Tanya nami hachi, kol ha'ochel mi'afara shel Babel ki'ilu ochel b'sar avutav. ויש אומרים כאילו אוכל שקצים ורמסים. With regard to the statement that the corpses of those who perished in the flood came to Babylonia, Rabbi Yami says concerning anyone who eats the dust of Babylonia, it is as if he eats the flesh of his ancestors, since there is a great deal of dust from the dead there. This is also taught in a Braita concerning anyone who eats the dust of Babylonia. It is as if he eats the flesh of his ancestors. And some say it is as if he eats repugnant creatures and crawling things, which also died in the flood and were absorbed by the ground of the Babylonian. The Mishnah teaches that if one sacrifices the scapegoat of Yom Kippur outside the temple, he's exempt from the prohibition against sacrificing outside, since the Torah states, and to the entrance of the tent of meeting he did not bring it, Leviticus 17:3-4, and the scapegoat is not fit to be brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting. Ureminu, I will ask you a question. Ureminu, o korban shomea, ani avilu b'shem bezek avai, shenikru korban shenemar ben akne es korban Hashem. And the Gemara raises a contradiction from a Braita. The verse states, to present it as an offering to the Lord, Leviticus 17:4. And it is derived from the word offering, that one who slaughters non-sacred animals inside the temple is not liable. The Braita asks, or perhaps, from the word offering, I would derive that the prohibition against slaughtering outside the temple applies even to items consecrated for temple maintenance, as they too are called offerings, as it is stated with regard to the spoils of the war against Midian. And we have brought the Lord's offering, what every man has gotten of jewels, of gold, armlets and bracelets, signet rings, earrings, and girdles, to make atonement for our souls before the Lord. Numbers 31:50. These were certainly not items consecrated for the altar. Talmud Lama. Talmud Lama, Talmud Lama, da 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 da. Talmud Lama, V'Safar Elohim. Therefore, the verse states, and to the entrance of the tent of meeting he did not bring it, Leviticus 17:4, which teaches that this halakha applies only to that which is fit to come to the entrance of the tent of meeting, meaning is fit to be sacrificed. Excluded are items consecrated for temple maintenance, which are not fit for sacrifice. The writing continues, perhaps I shall exclude these, meaning items consecrated for temple service, which are not fit to be sacrificed upon the altar, from the prohibition against slaughtering outside the temple. But I shall not exclude the scapegoat, which is fit to come to the entrance of the tent of meeting. Therefore, the verse states, to present it as an offering to the Lord, which serves to exclude from this prohibition the scapegoat, which is not designated as a sacrifice to the Lord, but rather sent to Azazel. According to the Braita, the scapegoat is fit to be brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting. Lo kashya, this is Ishkan Kash, it's not difficult. Kan kadim hargarono, kan acharagarono. The Gemara answers, this is not difficult. Here the Braita states that the scapegoat is fit to be brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting, is referring to before the lottery, wherein the goats of the Day of Atonement are brought into the temple courtyard, and the high priest draws lots to determine which is to be sacrificed to the Lord, and which is for Azazel. There, the Mishnah that states that the scapegoat is not fit to be brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting is referring to after the lottery, at which point it is no longer fit for the temple. The Gemara challenges, after the lottery, it is also fit to be brought inside, and there is still an obligation for the high priest to recite confession upon it in the temple courtyard. Rather, if Mani said, this is not difficult, as here the Braita that states that the scapegoat may be brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting is referring to before there's a confession, when it is still fit to enter the temple. There, the Mishnah that states that it is not fit to be brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting is referring to after the confession, at which point it is no longer fit to be brought inside. The Mishnah teaches that with regard to an animal that actively copulated with a person, or an animal that was the object of bestiality, or another disqualified offering, such as an animal that was designated for idol worship, or one that was worshipped, if one sacrificed it outside the temple courtyard, he is exempt. This is because, with regard to the prohibition against slaughtering outside, the Torah states he did not bring it to present it as an offering to the Lord before the tabernacle of the Lord. Leviticus 17:4, which teaches that there is no liability for slaughtering outside the temple courtyard an animal that is not fit to be sacrificed. The Gemara asks, and with regard to this too, derived from the first part of the verse to the entrance of the tent of meeting, that as in the case of the red heifer and the scapegoat, if an animal is not fit to be brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting, one is not liable for slaughtering it outside.